November in Regensburg always turns cold early. It was barely 6:45 in the morning, yet the wind off the Danube already sliced straight into the collar like a razor blade. Anna Keller walked quickly along the old cobblestone sidewalk, her boots clacking in steady rhythm, the dark green scarf fluttering wildly behind her. She had just finished the night shift at the pharmacy, her eyes still stinging from lack of sleep. But she had to stop at Haus am Eck Bakery before heading home to catch up. The shop had only just opened. The smell of fresh baked bread mingled with the chill and jolted her fully awake. Anna joined the short queue behind three people, hands buried in the pockets of her wool coat, eyes drifting idly toward the frost-clouded window. And there he was. A small, elderly man stood right at the edge of the sidewalk, just a few steps from the door. He wore a threadbare gray wool coat with a frayed collar and an old beret perched on his head. His left arm clutched a paper bag of bread. With his right hand, he was trying unsuccessfully to pick up a brown leather wallet that had fallen into the snow. Thin, age-spotted fingers trembled violently. The wallet slipped from his grasp again and again. Nobody in the queue paused. People hurried past, breath rising in white puffs, eyes fixed straight ahead. Anna sighed, pushed the door open, and stepped back out into the cold. The little bell jingled faintly behind her. "Sir," she said, bending down. She picked up the wallet, dusted off the thin layer of snow, and held it out to him. "Here, let me." The old man looked up. Pale blue eyes clouded with cataracts, yet they brightened for a moment with surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, miss." "My hands are bad again today," he said, his voice hoarse but carrying the warm cadence of Bavaria even though it was frail. "Getting old. They don't obey anymore." Anna smiled, and without thinking reached to take the paper bag from his arm. It was still warm. Heat seeped through the paper. "You live close by, don't you? Let me carry this the rest of the way for you. It's freezing." He started to refuse, lips moving soundlessly, but then simply nodded, as if even the energy for politeness had run out. "I'm sorry to trouble you. Just around the corner there, the house with the purple paper flowers in the window." Anna slipped her arm lightly through his, just enough for him to lean on without feeling led. They walked slowly along the slippery pavement, snow crunching under their shoes. When they reached the door, he fished an old key the size of a child's hand from his coat pocket and slid it into the lock with a dry clack. The heavy wooden door creaked open, releasing a breath of pine wood and dried flowers, like something exhaled from the past. "Thank you," he said again, this time looking straight into her eyes. "I'm Heinrich Lehmann. If you pass by tomorrow, knock. I still have some homemade cherry jam." Anna smiled and handed the bag back. "I'm Anna. I'll knock tomorrow." She had no idea that one casual promise had just opened a door the old man had been quietly waiting behind his whole life. The next day, Anna deliberately left the apartment 10 minutes early. The sky was still pitch black. Street lamps cast glowing orange circles onto the snow. She stood in front of the bakery, hands in pockets, stealing glances toward the corner with the purple paper flowers. Heinrich was already there. He wore the same gray wool coat and carried a smaller paper bag than yesterday, but he stood a little straighter as though he had been waiting on purpose. When he spotted Anna, he raised one hand in a slow wave, no longer trembling. "I thought you'd make me knock," Anna said with a laugh, walking over. "I've been up since 5. Couldn't sleep. Figured if you came, we might as well walk back together." And so it became routine. Every morning, Heinrich waited in exactly the same spot, sometimes arriving a few minutes before Anna. She would take the paper bag from his hand, sometimes 2 sugar-dusted pretzels, sometimes a small slice of Stollen, and together they walked the 50 meters to his apartment. That short distance grew longer by a few minutes each day because he began to talk. He talked about Elizabeth, his wife, who used to work at the biggest bakery in town before the war. She made buttercream so good people queued from dawn, he said, eyes shining like a child's. All I ever did was eat it. He talked about the old piano in the living room, where he once gave private lessons, 10 children crammed onto the long bench every afternoon. Now it's too quiet. Just the clock ticking. Anna listened. She said little about herself, the exhausting night shifts, her mother's bad back in the countryside, the 5th-floor walk-up with no elevator, but he didn't need to ask much. He only needed someone to walk beside him. On the 3rd week, Anna brought a tin of homemade ginger biscuits. The 4th week, she bought an extra chestnut pastry for him. One morning of fine, drizzling rain, she saw him huddled under the bakery awning without an umbrella. Without a second thought, she unwound her green scarf and wrapped it around his neck. "I've got another one at home," she said. He touched the edge of the soft wool with his fingertips. This green, same color as Elizabeth's eyes once were. From then on, the green scarf lived in his coat pocket and came out whenever he stepped outside to wait for Anna. And every time the heavy wooden door closed behind them, with its familiar clack, the smell of fresh bread mingling with old wood and dried flowers made Anna feel somehow lighter. She had no idea that at 34 she was relearning how to slow down just enough to hear another person breathe. Winter finally surrendered. The snow melted into shimmering puddles on the cobblestones, then dried, leaving behind the scent of fresh earth. One April morning, Anna noticed 2 pots of deep purple pansies on Herr Heinrich's windowsill. He was watering them with a battered old can, whistling a tune from long ago. "Did you grow them from seed?" Anna asked, surprised. "No, I bought the seedlings. But I told them I'm still alive, so they'd better bloom beautifully." He grinned, showing a perfect set of false teeth. From then on, Friday afternoons became part of Anna's week. She finished her shift at 6, stopped at the little supermarket for a cheap bunch of tulips or a box of herbal cough drops, then walked the 10 minutes to Heinrich's house. He was always waiting, the door ajar, warm yellow light spilling into the hallway, like a wordless invitation. The living room was always warm. The small stove crackled softly. 2 old porcelain cups and a pot of chamomile tea already waited on the table. Heinrich pulled out a chair for Anna, as though she were the most honored guest, then sat down at the walnut piano darkened by time. "Shall I teach you a little piece?" He placed Anna's hands on the keys. His fingers were thin knuckles, prominent yet steady as they guided hers through the opening notes of Für Elise. Anna stumbled, hit wrong notes, and burst out laughing. He didn't scold her. He just laughed along a hoarse but strangely clear sound. One evening in May, he opened a drawer and took out a small porcelain cup painted with violets. This was Elizabeth's favorite. She said every time she drank from it, she felt young again. He placed it in Anna's hands. "Now it's yours. So you remember to drink your tea and stay warm." Anna held the cup. Her palms grew hot, though the porcelain was cold. The following week, he caught a bad cold. Anna discovered it when he didn't appear outside the bakery for 3 straight days. She ran to his house and found him slumped in the armchair, blanket pulled to his chin, face flushed with fever. She cooked porridge, took his temperature, called the doctor, and sat beside him all night. The next morning he woke, took her hand, and whispered, "You're like the daughter I once had, if I'd ever had a daughter." Anna quietly went to the bank and paid his overdue electricity bill. She said nothing, just slipped the receipt into his mailbox. When he found it, he didn't scold her. He simply left a fresh jar of cherry jam outside her door with a small note. "Thank you for not letting me sit in the dark." That spring, for the first time in many years, Heinrich Lehmann no longer counted the days alone. And Anna Keller realized her heart had grown an extra little room, warm, old, and filled with the scent of violets. June 18th. Regensburg burned. The sun hung lazily above the red-tiled roofs. The air was so humid, breathing felt heavy. Anna got off work early, sweat sticking to her back, dreaming only of a cold shower. Still, she stopped at the bakery, as always, and bought a sesame pretzel for herself and a small, crisp bretzel for Heinrich. He had said yesterday he felt like something crunchy. He wasn't at their usual spot. Anna stood there a few minutes, clutching the two warm paper bags, staring down the street. No gray wool coat, no beret, no familiar slow wave. She smiled to herself. He must have dozed off. Yesterday he'd complained the heat made him dizzy. She walked straight to his house. The outer door was ajar, something that had never happened before. Anna pushed it gently. The hinges groaned creak, creak into the silence of the hallway. The scent of pine and dried flowers was still there, but today it carried something else. Colder, harder to name. Herr Heinrich, no. Answer. She stepped into the living room. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the old lace curtains, laying long golden stripes across the polished wooden floor. He sat in the burgundy-upholstered armchair, back straight, head tilted slightly to the right, as if napping. Both hands rested in his lap. The index finger of his right hand still lightly touched the white E key on the open piano beside him, the very note he always made her practice. Anna froze. On the small table beside the chair sat his morning cup of chamomile tea, long cold, a trace of honey still clinging to the rim. To the right of the chair lay a thick cream-colored envelope placed neatly, the handwriting shaky but deliberate in dark blue ink für Anna. Wenn ich einmal nicht mehr da bin. For Anna. When one day I'm no longer here. She knelt in front of the chair and gently touched the back of his hand. Ice cold. The skin so thin she could see the blue veins beneath in the sunlight. His face was peaceful. The corners of his mouth curved in the faintest smile. The one he saved for when Anna finally played Für Elise without a single wrong note. Grandpa? Her voice broke so soft only she could hear. She held his hand for a long time, pressing it to her cheek, the way her mother used to do when she was sick as a child. Tears fell onto his skin, hot at first, then cooling on flesh that no longer held warmth. She didn't know how long she stayed there. When she finally looked up, the light had turned golden orange, bathing his face in a glow so tender it seemed he was dreaming of Elizabeth and their youngest, brightest days. Anna leaned forward and kissed his forehead, a brief, reverent kiss, the kind a daughter gives her father. Then she reached for the envelope. Her hands shook so badly it slipped to the floor. She picked it up, clutched it to her chest, and whispered between sobs, I'm going home now, Grandpa. I'll bring violets when I visit tomorrow. She did not yet know that inside that envelope Heinrich had quietly written down the rest of the life he had left, and given it to the only person in the world he wanted to call his child. Anna got home when the sky was pitch black. She collapsed onto the kitchen floor, too weary to turn on the light. The cream-colored envelope sat on the table like a foreign object, heavier than its actual weight. She was afraid to open it, afraid that the old man's final words would tear open the wound that had only just begun to scab. In the end, she opened it anyway, using the small paper knife Heinrich had once warned her about. Be careful, Anna, or you'll cut yourself. Inside was a 4-page handwritten letter, the script slanted, some words smudged where his hand had trembled. Beneath it lay a stack of notarized photocopies, the deed transferring the ground-floor apartment power of attorney over the savings account, and a will drafted before a lawyer 3 months earlier, bearing his shaky but clear signature, and those of two witnesses. Anna read the letter aloud in a whisper, as though any louder might wake him. My dear Anna, when you read this, I will have gone to join Elizabeth. I'm not sad, only relieved. I had no children, no grandchildren. People said I was alone, but from the day you knocked on my door, I knew I had a family. You are not my blood, but you are the one I chose to call my daughter. This house I bought in 1962 with my piano teacher salary and weekend overtime. Elizabeth said it was too old, yet she planted violets in the window for 47 years. Now I want it to belong to someone who will love it. The savings aren't much, 178,400 euros plus a little interest, but enough for you to buy a bigger apartment or save for your own children one day. I don't want it lying dead in the bank when I'm already dead. If anyone objects, tell them Heinrich Lehmann was perfectly lucid when he signed, and he knew exactly who he was giving it to. Thank you for giving me the most beautiful final 2 years. I ask only one thing now, and then play Für Elise on the old piano, even if you hit wrong notes. Elizabeth and I will hear you. I love you, your Grandpa Heinrich. March 12th of this year. When Anna finished, she had no tears left. She clutched the letter to her chest and lay on the cold kitchen floor until the phone rang shrilly. The caller was lawyer Nicholas Berg, polite but dry. Fräulein Anna Keller. I need to see you tomorrow at my office. The sole surviving relative of Herr Heinrich Lehmann has just contacted me. He wishes to review the will. Anna froze. Herr Heinrich had no relatives. She said, her voice hoarse. He says he is the grandson, Maximilian Lehmann, currently living in Munich. He is unhappy with the contents of the will. That night, Anna did not sleep. She sat by the window staring into the dark street, the violet-painted porcelain cup clenched in her hands. She didn't want the house. She didn't want the money. She only wanted to see Heinrich standing at the corner tomorrow morning, paper bag in hand, smiling when he spotted her. She did not know that the grandson, whose name Heinrich had never once mentioned, was on the night train from Munich to Regensburg, carrying a suitcase full of anger and a regret he hadn't yet acknowledged. 9 o'clock the next morning in Lawyer Berg's office on Obere Bachgasse, small room smelling of old paper and cold coffee. Anna sat alone at the long oak table, hands clasped tightly in her lap, the violet cup tucked in her bag like a talisman. The door opened. Maximilian Lehmann walked in. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, and a tie knotted so tightly it seemed to strangle every feeling. Short, neat brown hair, square jaw, steel gray eyes so cold the room seemed to drop a few degrees. He didn't greet her. He merely nodded at the lawyer and sat across from Anna exactly 1.40 meters away, the distance of strangers. Lawyer Berg slid a copy of the will across the table. As I explained on the phone, Herr Heinrich Lehmann executed this will on March 12th of this year, fully competent, signed by 2 witnesses and medically certified. All assets, the apartment at 14 Schäffnerstrasse, the savings account of 178,400 euros, and the 1924 Steinway piano are bequeathed to Fräulein Anna Keller. Maximilian didn't glance at the document. He stared straight at Anna, his gaze sharp enough to cut her in half. How long were you with my grandfather? His voice was low, flat, emotionless. Anna swallowed. Almost 2 years. 2 years. And in those 2 years, my grandfather transferred everything to a stranger. A thin, humorless smile. What do you do for a living? Fräulein Keller, I'm a pharmacist. Ah, pharmacist. Night shifts, modest salary. Must be nice to suddenly own an apartment in the old town and nearly 200,000 euros. Heat rushed to Anna's face. What exactly are you implying? I'm saying my grandfather was old, lonely, and easily manipulated. Maximilian opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. I have records proving he suffered severe depression after my grandmother died. Prescriptions for sedatives, psychiatric reports from 2018. I can take this to court and argue he lacked capacity when he made the will. Lawyer Berg started to speak, but Anna raised a hand to stop him. She met Maximilian's eyes. You can do that, she said, voice trembling but steady. But before you do, I want you to come to the apartment. Just once. See how he lived for the 15 years you never showed up. Maximilian stiffened. I don't need. You do. Anna cut in, her voice suddenly sharp for the first time. Because if you're going to call me a fraud, you should at least know how happy he was that someone remembered to buy him a Brazil every Thursday morning. Silence stretched on. Maximilian looked at her, the ice in his eyes cracking. Just a tiny fracture. Lawyer Berg cleared his throat softly. I suggest both parties meet at the apartment this afternoon at 3 p.m. with me present. That would be fair. Maximilian nodded curtly. He buttoned his suit jacket. 3 o'clock, he said, and left without looking back. Anna sat there a few seconds longer, fingers gripping her bag strap. She did not know that in the suitcase he had left at his hotel, Maximilian had brought an old photograph of himself at 8 years old, sitting on his grandfather's lap at the piano. The only picture he had kept after 15 years of arguments and silence. And that afternoon would change everything. 3 o'clock. Apartment 14. Scheffnerstrasse still carried the faint scent of mothballs and violets. Early summer light filtered through the lace curtains, scattering fish-scale patches of gold across the wooden floor. Maximilian stepped in behind Lawyer Berg, posture rigid, shoulders squared as if entering a boardroom. Anna stood beside the piano, fingers unconsciously brushing the white E key where Heinrich used to place her hand. She didn't look at Maximilian right away. She was afraid she would meet the same icy stare from that morning. Lawyer Berg cleared his throat, about to begin the formalities, when Maximilian raised a hand to silence him. He walked slowly around the room like a man entering a museum of his own memories for the first time. On the wall still hung the 1959 wedding portrait of Heinrich and Elizabeth, both radiant among a sea of carnations. On the bookshelf lay yellowed stacks of sheet music. On the small table beside the armchair sat a half-full jar of cherry jam lid, carefully closed with a little note in Anna's handwriting marking the date. Maximilian stopped at the shoe rack. There stood a pair of light brown women's boots, size 37. Anna's, which she always removed so she wouldn't scuff the floor Heinrich treasured like gold. He turned back. The edge in his eyes had softened. He kept this armchair, he said quietly, almost to himself. Anna nodded. He said you could only play with feeling when you sat in it. Maximilian moved to the small writing desk by the window. On it lay a neat stack of folded A5 papers. He picked up the top one and opened it. 11. October 2023. Today, Anna brought ginger biscuits. She laughed when I ate a fourth and said I was like a child. I laughed until my stomach hurt. I haven't laughed like that in years. 23. December 2023. Anna decorated the little Christmas tree with paper stars she cut herself. She sang Stille Nacht completely off-key, but it was still the most beautiful Christmas Eve since Elizabeth left. 30th May 2024. Anna played the middle section of Für Elise without a single wrong note. I sat and listened and cried. Not from sadness, but from too much happiness. Maximilian flipped through them quickly, hands trembling slightly. Hundreds of small pages, one for almost every day, the entire last 2 years of his grandfather's life recorded in shaky handwriting, yet glowing with light. He sank into the old armchair, buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook soundlessly. Anna stepped forward quietly and placed the violet-painted cup in his hands. He said Elizabeth loved this cup most, she whispered. He wanted his grandson to drink from it at least once. Maximilian looked up. The steel-gray eyes were red-rimmed now, every trace of coldness gone. I didn't come back for 15 years, his voice cracked. I was angry that he gave away my parents' savings to help poor students. I thought he was selfish. I was wrong. He stood and bowed deeply to Anna. I'm sorry. Everything, it's yours. I'll sign the acknowledgement today. You deserve it more than anyone. Anna shook her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. No. He wanted us to take care of this place together. She gestured toward the piano, the violet pots, the armchair still holding the ghost of warmth. Or we could turn it into a place where other old people never have to sit alone. Maximilian looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded slowly, surely. All right. I'll handle the renovations. And you'll give it its soul. They shook hands in the sun-filled room. For the first time, Maximilian smiled, an exact echo of Heinrich's smile when Anna finally played the last note perfectly. Outside the window, the violets swayed in the summer breeze as though Elizabeth and Heinrich were nodding in agreement. The opening day of Elizabeth's Tasse fell on a golden October afternoon, exactly 2 years after Heinrich left. The ground-floor apartment had been transformed, yet somehow remained unchanged. The old brick walls were cleaned, the windows widened to let light pour in. The 1924 Steinway gleamed in the center, like a restored king. On the wall hung an enlarged wedding photograph of Heinrich and Elizabeth. Beneath it, carved in simple wood, manchmal genügt eine Tasse Kaffee und ein offenes Herz. Sometimes all it takes is a cup of coffee and an open heart. Every afternoon from 3 o'clock, the scent of fresh bread and hand-roasted coffee drifted down Schäffnerstrasse. Elderly neighbors came and sat for free. They paid only if they wished. There was the widowed former math teacher, the retired watchmaker, whose birthdays no one remembered, the 91-year-old lady who still carried her tattered Rilke. Anna, now free of night shifts, stood behind the counter in a green apron, radiant with every smile. Maximilian appeared most weekends, sleeves rolled up, personally stirring pumpkin soup or tightening wobbly table legs. No one would guess the famous Munich architect knew how to make perfect Viennese coffee. The piano lid was always open. Anyone could sit and play. One day, an 87-year-old man played a trembling moonlight sonata, and the whole café fell silent. Another day, neighborhood children crowded in to learn the first notes of Für Elise from Anna herself. That afternoon, as the sun set, crimson over the Danube, Anna stood before Heinrich's photograph, holding the old violet cup. Maximilian came up behind her and rested a hand on her shoulder. He's smiling, he said softly. Anna nodded, eyes shining. He said it was all right if I played wrong notes sometimes. He'd still hear. She set the cup on the piano, filled it with steaming café au lait, then gently played the final phrase of Für Elise, this time without a single mistake. Outside the window, the violets bloomed again, deep purple as 10 years ago, as though not one day in this house had ever been empty of life. And Regensburg learned that Heinrich Lehmann's greatest inheritance was not in a bank, nor in old bricks. It lived in cups of coffee still warm in laughter, that rang out every afternoon, and in the hearts of those who finally understood. All it takes is one person stopping to ask, "Can I help you?" and an entire life is saved.